Eliminator Time Force, Part 2. Chapter 1. Hodge had become restless over the past hour as they ventured far outside the city. He was not a fan of long car trips, and certainly not a fan of being on unpaved country roads. 20 minutes of jostling around due to the dirt road was taking its toll. You know, Artemis, if you wanted to kill me and dump my body, you could have just left me with Dan and his crew, instead of going through the trouble of dragging me all the way out here, Hodge said jokingly. "Oh, are you getting scared, Hodge? You not a fan of being in the middle of nowhere? I've seen enough horror films to know this is the beginning of one. Pretty sure a guy in a human skin mask and a chainsaw is going to pop out at any minute." Artemis chuckled before responding. "Don't worry, we are out this far because of safety concerns. We were fortunate that the time machine delivers people and packages into the middle of nowhere. Made it a lot easier to buy the land way back when. So, do you have any backup coming in case Duke and his puppet master show up? Unfortunately, it's just the two of us. Other than you, the only other person I trust is Robert, and he's not a fighter." "Not a fighter?" Hodge replied in a shocked tone. "What? He didn't help you out during the war? When we arrived, we discussed tracking him down. Because to be blunt, we needed all the help we could get with the war effort. Ultimately, we decided against it because at that time, we had no idea if that would disrupt the timeline." "What do you mean?" "We were afraid that if we contacted him before he made Day of the Demon, it would create a paradox. If we pulled him into the war and he died, he wouldn't be in the movie. I never would have saw it and known that the time machine was actually a time machine." Hodge nodded in agreement. "Okay, that makes sense. It wasn't until the 1950s that we discovered we were outside the timeline. How did you discover that exactly? It doesn't sound like a theory you would want to test out on yourself." "Yeah, nobody was really lining up to be the guinea pig on that one," Artemis said with a laugh. "After the war, there were a small handful of us still active, working as a team to ensure that the future we had created remained intact. I was the main researcher and had numerous search protocols set up to look for any of our ancestors. With what we did in Europe, we had altered the timeline in a massive way. We saved tens of millions of lives. And not all of them were good ones, you know? So in addition to saving Susie Homemaker, you also saved Ted Bundy wannabes." "Exactly. So when the shipment came through in 1949, I ran a search on all of our ancestors to make sure everyone was alive and well." "And I'm guessing someone wasn't?" Hodge inquired. "Well, yes and no. Everyone's great-grandparents were alive, but not hooking up with who they originally did. I can see that. I mean, the war uprooted millions of people in this country, especially compared to what you have told me about the war in your time. Not just soldiers being shipped overseas, but people having different careers, interacting with different people. It's like your coffee example only on steroids." "Exactly. Once we discovered this, I did an extensive search through everyone's family tree. Out of the 5 of us in the group, only one of us had a record of being born. And since none of you did the Marty McFly vanishing act, that was a pretty clear indication that you were outside the timeline." Artemis nodded in agreement. "That's true, but it didn't really sink in for us until we met up for the 1965 shipment. In the late 40s, we went our separate ways, taking up residence in separate parts of the country. A couple of us kept hunting down the bad guys, but for the most part, everyone was retired and lived their own lives. When everyone walked into the room, it was hard not to notice the fact nobody had aged a day since over the past 4 decades. We kind of put 2 and 2 together at that point. Well, as far as problems go, I guess that's a good one to have. I've had more than my fair share of run-ins with people who have gone to great lengths to retain the appearance of youth." "I know. I read up on your stripper murder investigation," Artemis replied with a chuckle. "Terrible case, but totally didn't mind doing the witness interviews." "I'm sure your wife would be thrilled to hear that," she replied dryly. "Hey now, just because you've ordered doesn't mean you can't look at the menu," Hodge replied in a playful tone, triggering a disapproving look from Artemis. The smile on Hodge's face slowly faded. "Please don't tell my wife I said that." "You're lucky I like you, Hodge," Artemis said as she slowed the car. "We're here." Hodge gazed upon the fortress-like structure that was standing in the middle of a clearing. Double 20-foot-tall barbed-wired fences, reinforced concrete walls, and no apparent door made this an imposing building. If anybody stumbled across this on a hike, they would most certainly turn and walk the other way. Holy hell, that's a building. Well, we had the resources, so we decided to make this place as secure and imposing as possible, to make sure nobody would intercept our supplies if we happened to be late to a drop. I'm pretty sure you succeeded in that. I mean, I don't even see a door. Artemis just winked as she punched in a lengthy code into her cell phone. After completion, the barbed wire fences opened up and part of the gray concrete on the building bubbled away to reveal a giant steel door. "When we survive this and catch Duke, can I put in an order with you for some future tech?" Hodge inquired hopefully. "Sure, you'll just have to wait 5 years to get it." "Wait, seriously, how do you put in orders? Can you communicate with the future?" In a manner of speaking. Before we left, we created a messaging system using books. "Books?" Hodge asked with a hint of doubt in his voice. "Yeah, we knew we'd have money and could get anything published we wanted. So we each had a pen name to write under. In the beginning, we would buy our way into dime store sci-fi novels and magazines. We would include what we needed as items in the story as a plot device, like explosive ammo or an extra laptop. When it came time for the shipment to be assembled by our team in the future, they would search for pen names, read the stories, and fulfill the orders. We had to get a little creative with the names once we figured out we were borderline immortal, so we passed the legacy on to our children. Technically, I'm a third-generation sci-fi writer with a rather impressive online following." Artemis proudly smiled at that last point. "Wait, what's your pen name? I read a lot of sci-fi growing up." Hodge said rapidly like an excited schoolgirl at a boy band concert. "What? No, I'm not telling." Hodge looked dejected. "Aw, come on. I really want to know if I'm your fanboy. It's my secret. Superman doesn't go around telling people he's Clark Kent after all." "Wait, so you'll openly share with me you're a time-traveling warrior who's killed an untold number of people, but you won't tell me your pen name?" "Yep," Artemis said with a huge grin. Hodge responded with a sigh. "Okay, I tell you what, you helped me kill Duke and catch my former team member. I'll give you a hint." "Deal," Hodge said with a thumbs up. "So how long until the shipment arrives?" Artemis inspects the clock on her phone. "About 15 minutes, so we should head in and get in position." Chapter 2. The duo walked into the cavernous building, kicking up dust as they went along. Artemis had been the only visitor here for decades, and cleanliness hadn't been very high up on her list. The bulk of the floor plan consisted of an empty space, with mid-sized rooms with heavily tinted windows on either side. "Welcome to the warehouse, home of the amazing time-traveling shipments," she said in a jovial tone, leading them into one of the rooms. "So now what?" Hodge inquired, looking around at the vast emptiness. "We hang out in this room, look away from the windows, and drink them if you got them." Hodge reacted by pulling out a flask and toasting Artemis. "Cheers. I knew there was a reason I picked you as a partner," she said as the two of them took a seat on the floor of the small room. "So how do we know when the shipment arrives? Does it do that giant electrical storm thing from the Terminator?" "Oh God, nobody is going to be naked, are they?" "No on both fronts there. Since we don't age, there is no need to send back more people, and we'll know when the shipment arrives when this room is bathed in light." "Even through the blacked-out windows?" Hodge asked as he looked up towards them. Artemis quickly shielded his eyes and pulled his view back to the ground. "Yes, even through the windows. Trust me, you don't want to be looking that direction when it comes in, unless of course you want to be blinded in a horrific manner." "I would think any sort of blinding would be horrific," he responded in a smart-ass tone. "Well, there is losing your eyesight, and there is having your eyeballs melt inside your skull," Artemis retorted. Hodge lost the smart-ass tone in a hurry. Man, you future people don't fuck around, do you? Exploding limbs, melting eyeballs. I mean, is there anything in the future that isn't nightmare-inducing? Nope. It's pretty much a non-stop orgy of chaos and mayhem. Damn, it's a shame I won't live long enough to see it, he said with a hint of regret. Before the conversation could continue, the room illuminated. Even with the protective windows, Hodge and Artemis had to shield their eyes from the light. After about 30 seconds, everything returned to normal. All right, let's go get our future care package, Artemis said, leaping to her feet in anticipation. The two of them walk out into the center of the room to find 3 large discount plastic tubs sitting on the floor. A bit of residual smoke hovers about, looking like a discount magician who didn't purchase enough dry ice for his show. Hodge is a bit perplexed at what he sees. Wow. I was expecting something a little more futuristic. What? They are cheap and effective. Plus, we have to do everything we can to remain hidden, so a shiny futuristic box isn't a great thing to have laying around. Plus, there was a spare room filled with these things back at the bunker. An unknown, booming voice bellowed from the other spare room. Artemis got into a defensive position while Hodge drew his firearm. Both of them remained on guard as 6'4" blonde-haired perfect specimen of a man emerges from the darkness. His physique made him look as though he was carved out of granite, and when combined with his height, made him an imposing foe. Once Artemis got a good look at him, she let her guard down. "Rudo, is that you?" she asked with a sense of disbelief. "My God, I thought you were dead. Nobody has heard from you in damn near 40 years. Rudo paused about 10 feet away from the duo, giving Hodge a sense of uneasiness. "Well, I have had some troubles in recent years that forced me underground, all because I dared to live a normal life for a while, in this new future we created." "What, did you get a wife, 2.5 kids, and a house with a white picket fence?" Artemis asked in a playful tone. "All of that, actually. Back in '67, I met this wonderful woman named Mary. She worked as a waitress at this small-town diner just outside of Nashville, and I fell hard for her. After what we went through in the war and all those years tracking down the worst of the worst, I just wanted a chance to be a normal person, even if it was just for a little bit. Took me a while to win her over, but once I did, we hit the road and left everything behind. Spent 2 years traveling the world. It was so amazing to see the world through her eyes. And frankly, nice to see Europe again without having to worry about Nazi death squads around every corner. By '72, we had settled back in Nashville, married with 2 kids, Bill and Sasha. Had the biggest house on the block and enough in the bank to pay someone to mow the lawn because let's be real, I'll gladly track a serial killer across 4 states. But I'll be damned if I'm going to mow a lawn as big as Volunteer Stadium. I had it all, but by the late '90s, a problem arose. Let me guess, everyone got older but you, Hodge inquired. You are quite correct, Special Agent Hodge. At first, I was able to pass it off as good genes, but that only worked for so long, Rudo replied. Wait, how do you know my name? Hodge asked with a hint of fear in his voice. Patience, Agent Hodge. Patience, Rudo coldly replied. May I continue? Oh, I'm sorry. By all means. Mary began to question why I still looked the same as I did when we met 30-some-odd years ago. After a lot of consideration, I made the decision to trust the woman I had dedicated a large portion of my life to, and told her the truth. Oh, Rudo, Artemis said with a twinge of disappointment and pity. I know, Artemis. Believe me, I know. I sat her down and told her everything, even showed her the computer and let her get a glimpse of the future. I thought that coming clean would make everything okay. Instead of feeling relieved, however, she felt betrayed that I had been lying to her since the moment we met. Over the next few weeks, our relationship fell apart. At first, it was non-stop arguments. Then it was on to the silent treatment. I was hoping she just needed time to adjust. But ultimately, that was a foolish hope, Rudo said, his voice trailing off as he struggled to say what he did next. One morning, she asked if I would go to the store for her. At first, I thought this was her finally coming around, but I didn't trust it, even though I desperately wanted to. I drove around the neighborhood park a couple of times and did a drive-by of the house before running the errand. There was a black SUV in the driveway. My heart sank because I knew exactly who they were. Well, not the specific agency, mind you, just someone from the government. I went into my house and found her at the kitchen table with 2 agents and my computer. I'll spare you the details of what happened next, but let's just say that there is a lengthy disclaimer that is attached to any real estate listing of that property. "My God, Rudo," Artemis screamed. "Did you kill your wife? Your kids?" I didn't have a choice. He responded with regret in his voice. I had to eliminate anyone I had been close to in order to protect the secret. "Bullshit," Hodge interjected. "It's not bullshit, Agent. She has undoubtedly shown you the computer. Can you imagine what our government, hell, any government would do with that technology? It had to be protected at all costs, even the price I paid." Rudo paused for a moment to collect himself. The thoughts of what he did to his family haunted him, even if it was necessary. After I committed those atrocities, I had to fake my own death so there wouldn't be a manhunt. Luckily, I was able to get ahead of it and nobody outside of the deceased knew of what I possessed. Still, even though I know I did what had to be done, my actions took a severe toll on me. And to make matters worse, most of the tech was damaged beyond repair in the process, leaving me with a limited knowledge base. Artemis shook her head in disgust, trying to wrap her head around everything. "Christ. Rudo, how many people had to die because you wanted to have a normal life?" "Only about half a dozen," he replied. "And really, Artemis, who are you to pass judgment on me since you are standing beside Agent Hodge here?" "This is different," she replied. "You're right. You only have to kill 1 person instead of 6. "Wait, you are planning on killing me?" Hodge asked. "Only if you get chatty," she replied in a half-sarcastic tone. "Fair enough." Rudo chuckled at the exchange. "Oh, Artemis, it is so good to see you again after all these years. It warms my heart to know that even after a century on this earth, you are still as confident and cocky as always. And you are still as cold and ruthless as you were back in the war," Artemis replied bluntly. "But those were different times. And we didn't kill anyone we didn't absolutely have to. Well, in my view, everyone I've killed has been out of necessity. Just like 48 through 60. Artemis and Hodge regained their defensive stance in response to Rudo's admission. "So you are Duke's handler then?" Artemis asked. "I don't know if handler is the correct word. Duke, what do you think?" "I'm kind of partial to mentor, actually." Duke responded as he emerged from the darkness with 2 henchmen, all of them having guns drawn and trained on Artemis and Hodge. Anthony Duke was a compact powerhouse of a human being. He was only 5'4", but thanks to a combination of a 6-days-a-week workout regimen and a healthy dose of anabolic steroids, he was nearly as wide as he was tall. While his 2 henchmen, Pete and Rocco, towered over him, Duke had the core strength to lift them both off their feet simultaneously. Pete and Rocco both looked like they would be right at home in a dive biker bar, throwing back whatever cheap beer was on special that night. The only thing that set the 2 of them apart was a large scar on the left side of Rocco's face. "Which one do you want me to kill first?" Duke asked, while moving the barrel of his gun back and forth between the 2. "Neither." Rudo responded with authority. Duke did not appear happy with that answer, but did not get an opportunity to protest. "Artemis and I have been through more together than you can comprehend, and I'm not going to be the reason she dies if I can help it. So what should we do with them?" "See if our friend Agent Hodge has some handcuffs on him, and secure them," Rudo responded. "Please make sure they are comfortable as they will be here for a while." Duke nodded in acknowledgement before moving towards Artemis and Hodge. "Okay, you 2, move over to the steel beams near the wall and get comfy. My 2 friends Pete and Rocco here will handcuff you. Once you have them secure, start loading up the truck," Rudo instructed. He walked over to Artemis, who was secured firmly to the beam, and kneeled beside her. I hate that it's come to this, Artemis. We have been through so much together. We rampaged through Europe together while taking down one of the most fearsome empires the world has ever seen. You and we prevented billions from perishing. We created a world far superior than even our wildest dreams could come up with. He paused, as if to contemplate what they had accomplished together. You know, it can even be argued that you and I are two of the most important people ever to exist in the history of the world. We have done more to shape the path of humanity than anybody who isn't currently worshipped by billions. Then why are you doing this? Artemis forcefully asked. Why are you being a mentor to a psychopath and murdering the future leaders of our country? I lost the ones I loved because I had to protect our secret from governments that would misuse it. However, if I were in charge and the entire world knew I was an immortal who could see into the future, there wouldn't be a secret to protect now, would there? So you are going on a killing spree just so you can be president? President, omnipotent God King. I'm open to whatever title they bestow upon me. You're crazy if you think the general public is going to elect an egotistical narcissist like you. Artemis scowled. They will when I'm the only viable option. Now that I have updated equipment, I can see the future in real time again. It's just a matter of taking out my opponents until I get one I can win against, either by their incompetence or by being able to dig up dirt on them for that October surprise. That hits every election. And that's the beauty of having an apprentice like Duke there. I don't even have to do the heavy lifting. You do know I'm going to do everything in my power to stop you, right? Frankly, I would be disappointed if you didn't. Rudo replied. In reality, I should just kill you and your partner now. But I have faith in you, Artemis. I know that more than anything, you want America to be the greatest it can possibly be. With me in charge, knowing all the things I will know, it will be the greatest. Rudo, we set out on a mission to save the country from destruction, not rule over it. But if I rule it, we save it not only for today, but for all eternity. I think once you see that, you'll understand that I'm right. And when that day comes, I hope that you'll join me, Rudo said before pointing to a case of gear on the ground. You see that? I'm leaving you a case of gear so you can see just how successful I am in this venture. Plus, I assume you're still sending movies out to Brent. Artemis nodded in the affirmative. Now, one of my associates will be dropping by here in 24 hours to give you a key for these handcuffs. Don't bother interrogating him, because he won't know where I'll be, as this is his final task for me. When you get back home with the equipment, look up the bright future I will provide for our country. Then continue what you have been doing all these years, saving the little guy. I swear to God, Rudo, I'm going to stop you. I admire your optimism, Artemis. However, by the time you are released from these cuffs, I'll be far away from here. And we both know that thanks to our unique relationship with time, I will be completely insulated from your reach until I'm in a position of power. Rudo stood up and began to walk away before turning around. I sincerely hope that once you've had a chance to look at the future, you'll decide to join me. Although if this is indeed the final time we're face to face, I just want you to know how appreciative I am of all the sacrifices you've made over the years in making our nation stronger. And for the record, by leaving you and your friend alive, I'm considering my debt to you paid in full. Good luck, Artemis. Rudo and his gang left the warehouse, slamming the door behind them and leaving Artemis and Hodge in relative darkness. The two of them sat in silence for a few moments before Hodge broke it. Any idea what time it is? Artemis chuckled before responding. Why? You have somewhere to be. Well, he said in 24 hours he is going to be gone. So I just wanted to know what our deadline is. Well, my arms are behind my back, so I can't see my watch. But if I had to guess, I'd say about 1 a.m. Not that it matters much, seeing as how we are stuck here. What? You don't have a fancy gadget that can get us out of these cuffs? What about your laser pointer of death? Yeah, that would work perfectly, if it wasn't in my front pocket. Well, damn, Hodge said in a near sarcastic tone. He began fidgeting as he continued to speak. So what did he mean by his debt being paid in full? It's kind of a long story, Artemis responded. Well, as fate would have it, I have some time to kill. This is true. During the war, a mission Rudo was heading up went south, and he ended up getting captured, giving himself up so that the other members of the team, including myself, could escape. Our commander made the decision to cut our losses and focus on the main task. I disagreed with his order and went on a solo rescue mission. God damn, you are one hardcore woman, Hodge exclaimed. Oh, you have no idea. He was being held at this small POW work camp, close to the border with Poland, with about 100 other men. The Germans had them working in a factory producing something or other. I'm not sure what they were making there, but whatever it was, it warranted a heavy guard presence, which made my job all the more difficult. I spent a day doing recon and had planned on doing a few more, but my timeline was moved up when I witnessed them execute a prisoner in the courtyard. I went in that night. How did you take out an entire work camp on your own? Hodge asked while continuing to move about. Luckily, it was a moonless night, so I was able to slip in undetected and into one of the bunkhouses. Rudo wasn't in the first one, but a dozen angry prisoners were. We didn't speak the same language. However, when I pulled out a fist full of knives and tossed it onto the bed, I'd like to believe we connected. They armed themselves, and after some crude hand gesturing and pointing at blonde hair, they understood who I was looking for. One of them had me follow him to the appropriate building, while the others began taking out the guards one by one. About 30 seconds after I reached Rudo, gunshots began to ring out. We didn't know if it was the guards retaking control or if our prisoner friends had upgraded their weapons. We didn't stick around long enough to find out. We spent the next 5 weeks on the run, evading capture and raising as much hell as we could. Unfortunately, in the process, we endangered the main mission. But that's another story for another time. Well, that explains why you two didn't want to kill each other. Kind of hard to go through something like that together and not be close. Hodge said as he continued to fidget. Yeah, we've been through some shit together. And Artemis paused and watched Hodge begin to really squirm about. What in the hell are you doing? So, in all your research on me, did you ever look really closely at my college years? He inquired. Well, I know you went to tech. Got a degree in criminal psychology with a minor in classic lit. Not sure how that explains whatever you are doing at the moment. It can be difficult to make ends meet as a college student. Some of my classmates waited tables, a few of them stripped, and me. Hodge pulled his arms free and held up the pair of open handcuffs. I was a street magician. You've got to be kidding me right now, Artemis said as she shook her head in amazement. Yeah, I'm just fucking with you, Hodge said as he made his way over to Artemis to free her. I had a crazy-as-hell girlfriend in college who was into some really kinky stuff. One night, she left me handcuffed to her roommate's bed and left to go to the bar. It was really awkward. A couple of hours later, when her roommate came home with his date, only to find a naked man chained to his bed. Man, that must have been a mood killer for him. Unfortunately, his boyfriend was a lot more open to the situation than I would have hoped, Hodge said with a sigh. Ever since that incident, I've had a handcuff key sewn into the sleeves of all my shirts. Hodge unlatched the cuffs, freeing Artemis. Just for the record, if we survive this and save the country from being taken over by a madman, we'll leave out the part where we were saved, thanks to your paranoia, brought on by kinky sexapades, gone wrong. That's probably a good call. Come on, let's grab the gear and get back to the office. Chapter 3. Artemis burst through the office door and made a beeline for her computer, leaving Hodge to drag in the crate of gear. Once he finally got into the room and kicked the door shut, Hodge ripped open the lid and began digging through the box. What am I looking for? He asked. It's going to look like a bright silver USB key. Should be near the top. Hodge shuffled some things around before locating it and tossing the drive over to Artemis. She plugged it into the side of her laptop and began typing away. What are you searching for? Anything about Rudo. If he is serious about running the country, he's going to show up on this drive. Then all we have to do is work backwards to see when he first shows up and hope there is a way to get to him. I don't understand. He's had this plan for a while now. Why couldn't you have found him before now? Don't you have a direct link to future news? Hodge inquired. Well, for starters, I wasn't looking for him because I thought he was either retired or dead. Secondly, even if I was looking for him, it's highly unlikely I would have found anything since before today. He didn't have the technology at his disposal to win. I mean, I have a deep-seated plan to become the first female host of Family Feud, but I don't have the means to actually accomplish it. So I wouldn't show up if I searched for myself in the future. Does that make sense? Hodge nodded in the affirmative. The moment he entered the warehouse and got in position to get the jump on us, he solidified his future. And now that he has a constant link to the future news, he has the means to achieve his goal. This will hopefully be a big enough splash to force him into the timeline. So how do you track him? Just type his name into future Google. Hardly. He's going to have to come up with a fake identity in order to run for office. Partly because he isn't technically born for another decade or so, and partly because if he ran under his real name, he'd have to explain why his family and a couple of government agents were found dead in his house. I'm going to start looking 10 years in the future. If he does become president, I can get a name and work backwards from there, hopefully finding him at a low enough level where he isn't surrounded by a massive protection detail. Then what? No clue. But first things first, we have to find him. Artemis typed furiously on the keyboard for a moment before freezing in fear at the screen, flashing no results found. What the fuck? She exclaimed, slumping back in her chair. This can't be good. No, it's not. I'm searching news sources 10 years from now and can't find anything. Wait, why isn't that good news? If you can't find him, then maybe he wasn't successful, Hodge hopefully suggested. You don't understand. I can't find anything about anybody. Every news source I used is simply gone 10 years from now. Hodge's knees buckled a bit, sending him down to the edge of the desk. Artemis continued to type, getting more frustrated as she went along. Jesus, nothing at 9 years. 8. Okay, here we go finally, Artemis said as she studied the results closely. Well, he's president 6 years from now. Wow, from nobody to president in 6 years. Guess knowing everything has its advantages. No kidding. So what did he do? Why did everything vanish? He asked. Artemis clicked the mouse a few times to move forward in the timeline. My guess is it has something to do with the fact that World War III broke out. How the hell did that happen? A few months after being sworn into office, he went and addressed the United Nations. During the speech, Rudo decided he wanted to let the world know he had the ability to see into the future. I'm sure that went over well. Everybody thought it was a joke and that he had some sort of mental break. Nobody took him seriously. Other world leaders, not to mention every late-night comedy show host, mocked him mercilessly. They stopped laughing a week later when he exposed some third-world dictatorships program to develop nuclear weapons. How did he manage that? He send in spies or something? Hodge asked. He was able to provide a photo of the country's leader standing in the WMD facility. Took it from the country's grade school history book that was written 50 years from now. With that photographic evidence, he was able to justify a preemptive invasion, and it was brutal. He micromanaged the entire war from the Situation Room, doling out orders on a near-hourly basis to minimize casualties. Knowing every single battle and how it went down was an amazing tactical advantage for our troops. Took all of 4 days for the country to be pacified, with our death toll under 100. And in typical Rudo fashion, he put the rest of the world on notice that if they tried anything against the country, they would meet the same fate. And let me guess, the other nations didn't like the idea of a rogue US president having the ability to see into the future, Hodge asked with a hint of sarcasm. Yeah, not so much, Artemis responded. Within weeks of the demonstration, China, Russia, and Europe came together and demanded that Rudo share the technology with them so that they could prevent attacks on their soil, as well as keeping us in check. When he refused, the rest of the nations came together and deemed America the enemy of the world. The war was short and brutal, with America dominating all comers. Unfortunately for Rudo, and really everyone, Russia had a secret stockpile of nukes that was just far enough away from the US reach. They were able to get off a barrage of nuclear missiles before their country was overrun. I'm sure Rudo took that well. See for yourself, Artemis said, playing a video from President Rudo. My fellow Americans, a few short months ago, you placed your trust in me to make America the greatest nation that has ever existed in the history of the world. We became so great that our supposed allies got jealous and wanted to take us down a notch or two, so we would be at their level. At first, they just wanted what we had, but when I, your president, refused to hand it over, they made the decision to destroy it and us. As I deliver this message to you, a barrage of nuclear weapons are bearing down on our great nation. Within the hour, everything that we have built over the centuries, every bit of greatness will be vaporized. But fear not my people, for we will not go quietly into that good night. I have ordered the launching of every missile within our arsenal. With our dying breath as a nation, we will strike back at our assaulters with such fury and force that it will crack the earth itself. Even though we will no longer be here, you can rest in peace knowing that our actions and our greatness will remain forever. Godspeed, and God bless America. There are also an alarming number of live stream videos of the world ending, which I'll spare us, Artemis said as she shut the video. Holy hell, that was all kinds of terrifying, Hodge said. Didn't take long for all that power to go straight to his head. You have to understand, Rudo was always the most dedicated, most patriotic among our group. When we discovered we could go back and alter history, he was the first one to volunteer. During the years before we left, he did tireless research on the war, learned multiple regional languages, and familiarized himself with every resistance group that we might come across. By the time we hit Europe, he knew exactly what needed to be done in order to accomplish the mission. He was, and is, willing to do whatever it takes to make our country the greatest. So even if we show him this video in the aftermath of nothingness, he won't abandon his plans? Unfortunately, no. This will only get him to work harder and try to find a way to achieve his goals of American supremacy. So how do we stop him? I don't know yet. I need time to trace his steps, Artemis said. Hodge, it's 5 in the morning. There is a comfy spot in the corner there if you want to get some rest. It's going to take me a while to figure out our next move. Hodge reluctantly nodded in agreement. Okay, but if you find anything or if I can do anything at all, no matter how small, then you wake me up. Just hit start on the coffee maker and I'll be good. Hodge shot Artemis a thumbs up before making his way towards his makeshift bed. Artemis nodded before turning her attention back to the computer, furiously typing away. Chapter 4. The sun peeked through the drawn blinds at the office, reflecting gently off of Artemis's stained coffee mug. She was still typing away when Hodge awoke from his short nap. Ugh, what time is it? He asked, wandering over to Artemis. About 9. You had any luck tracking him down? Not really, she said, picking up her coffee mug and waving it in Hodge's general direction as a signal for a refill. She continued to speak as he fetched the pot. The first sign of him I have is 6 weeks from now in Rhode Island when he gets a job as the chief of staff for a member of the U.S. House. Great, Hodge said, filling both Artemis and his own mug with coffee. Then we just have a road trip and get him in 6 weeks. By then, it'll be too late. He'll be in the public eye, surrounded by security. Not to mention Duke and his henchmen. I'm guessing Duke didn't show up either. Nope, they are both completely off the grid until 6 weeks from now. Hodge sat on his favorite corner of the desk and nursed his coffee before having a revelation. Wait, what about the henchmen? Can we track him through them? It's unlikely since Rudo doesn't keep people around him very long. After a few days of work, he'll pay them off with a couple of hot sports betting tips so they can make a fortune. He also lets them know if they talk. It won't be that difficult for him to track them down, so they obey and keep quiet about it. You have a better idea. Artemis contemplated for a moment before shrugging her shoulders. Nope, I don't. Okay, so what do we know about these two? I heard Duke call them Pete and Rocco, and one of them had a facial scar. Artemis sighed audibly. It could take days to find a match. And we don't have that kind of time. Hodge reached into his pocket and grabbed his cell phone. Let me make a call. I have a CI who owes me a few favors. If these guys have been active in the area, he might be able to help out. Just a word of warning though, he's a bit salty. Don't worry, I'm R-rated, Artemis said with a wink before getting to work on her research. Hodge dialed the phone and put it on speaker. It rang multiple times before a groggy man on the other end finally answered. What? The man said with venom. Hey, Jimbo, it's Hodge. Listen, I need a favor. Motherfucker, it's 9 in the goddamn morning. Don't you know people like me sleep in the daytime? Jimbo replied. I'm sorry, man. If I had any other options, I would take them. I kind of got a life or death situation over here, Hodge pleaded. Dude, save me your sob story. Just get to the point so I can go back to bed. My bitches are getting cold. All right, I'm looking for a guy I had a run-in with last night. Rough-looking dude has a nasty scar on his left cheek. Goes by either Pete or Rocco. Quiet dude who looks like he's gotten his ass kicked a few too many times. Yeah, that sounds about right, Hodge replied. That sounds like Rocco Giovanni. Goes by Rocky G. Used to run some errands for me a while back till he fucked me over, and I had to show him the door. You are awesome, Jimbo. Hey, Hodge, you just looking to put a name to a face? Or are you looking to actually get your hands on this dude? Jimbo asked. Why, you know how I can track him down. The easiest way to find him is to find where his girl's band is playing. They are some loud, angry metal band called Valkyrie's Revenge. I appreciate the tip, but given the high-level shit he's into, I don't know if he's going to be hitting the clubs for a concert. Hodge replied with a sense of skepticism. Hodge, my man, you don't understand. This guy is at every one of his girls' gigs. Motherfucker was 3 hours late with a delivery to me because he stopped by the club to watch her play. I mean, this bitch ripped his nuts off and has them displayed on the mantle. Doesn't even have the decency to put them in her purse. Just right there, up on the mantle. Hell, she even shows them off to her friends and everything. I know we've all had that one girl who drove us crazy, but there's being into a girl being pussy whipped, and then there's whatever the fuck this kid is. Trust me, if his girl is playing a show, he's gonna be there. You're a lifesaver, Jimbo. Yeah, I know. Just remember this shit next time I get busted. Consider me your get-out-of-jail-free card, he said as he hung up the phone. He seems like a lovely fellow, Artemis joked. Yeah, he's not exactly the kind of guy you invite over for Thanksgiving dinner, but in a case like this, he's invaluable. Artemis typed away, pulling up the webpage for Valkyrie's Revenge. All right, found Valkyrie's Revenge. And damn, no shows for a couple of weeks. Why don't we book them? I mean, doesn't Robert own one of the most famous metal bars in the city? So the plan is to book this band on the slight hope that they accept. Rocco the Scar-faced douchebag shows up, and we are able to interrogate him as to where Rudo is hiding. Artemis asked skeptically. Yeah, I know. It's thin. It's anorexic ballerina thin. But it's the best we got, so I'll make the call, Artemis said as she reached for the phone and dialed. Hey, Robert, need a favor. Chapter 5. Hours have passed since Artemis made the call. She is playing solitaire on the computer, while Hodge is pacing back and forth. Both of them are attempting to temper their apprehension, knowing if Robert doesn't come through, it's all over. So, what's the plan if the band can't play tonight? Hodge asked. Buy some property in the desert and build a biodome, Artemis playfully responded. Pretty sure we could even get Pauly Shore to join us. He seems like the kind of guy that would do anything for money these days. Do me a favor. If I ever meet Brent, please remind me to ask him what he was thinking by allowing Pauly Shore to have a career. You should have seen the guy who was popular before him. It was one of the few times I've ever requested Brent straight up murder an entertainer. Yikes, Hodge responded. He must have been unbearable. Just imagine the worst prankster you can think of, but with multi-million-dollar budgets. Sounds like justifiable homicide in my book. Artemis's phone began to ring. It's Robert, so fingers crossed, she said as she answered. Give me some good news, Rob. The girl screamed so loudly when I said I needed them to play tonight that I'm pretty sure I went deaf in one ear. Robert said. So I'm guessing that's a yes. They go on at 8. Bring earplugs. Thanks, Robert, Artemis said as she hung up the phone. Okay. We're on. 8 o'clock tonight. Hodge fist pumped in celebration of the news. So what do we do in the meantime? We have 8 hours to kill. Need to make a stop and gear up. Why don't you keep your gear here? Hodge inquired. You don't spend years waging a guerrilla war against the Nazi war machine in Germany and other occupied territories without adhering to the worst-case scenario mentality. By the end of the war, I had dozens of safe houses and stashes set up across Europe. Been doing the same here in the States ever since I got back, some of which are better equipped than others. The stuff I keep on hand here works great for small-timers like Kevin Hauser and those douchebags in the woods. But we are about to take on a much, much tougher foe. Makes sense to me. So where do we need to go? Hodge asked. So how do you feel about Chinese food? Chapter 6. Austin is like most major cities, where ethnic communities will move into a small neighborhood and make it their own. The Chinese district was just north of downtown and thrived thanks to the influx of college students. Most of the stores and restaurants in this district catered to their English-speaking audience by offering English-language menus. However, the Chinese eatery that Artemis led Hodge into did not. It didn't even have an English-language sign on the outside. So it was no surprise that they were the only 2 Americans in the place. A young Chinese man walked towards them and started speaking in Mandarin. Hodge just smiled and nodded, while Artemis nodded and responded in fluent Mandarin. Hodge stood in amazement as the 2 of them went back and forth for a few moments before the young man showed them to a table, handed them a menu, then walked off. When the hell were you going to tell me you spoke Mandarin? Hodge asked in amazement. I can speak every language, actually. Come again. How is that possible? Some amazing future tech that came about 20 years ago. Little device about the size of a grain of rice that is implanted behind the ear, automatically translates every language and actually takes over the speech center of my brain and allows me to respond in the appropriate language. Do you have another one of those? That sounds amazing, Hodge inquired hopefully. Sorry, but it was custom made for me. Plus, in your line of work, it could very easily get you in trouble. How so? I would think that being able to speak the language of whoever I'm interviewing would be a huge positive. Well, once it's implanted, the translator doesn't have an off switch. So let me see if I can spell it out for you in a culturally sensitive manner as to why that's an issue. Imagine if you have to interview a couple of very enthusiastic rap fans, and they are speaking a lot of slang. What do you think their reaction would be to a middle-aged white man responding in the same manner? Point taken, Hodge said as the waiter came over to the table and dropped off a duffel bag at Artemis's feet. What's this? My gear, Artemis responded as she looked over the menu. She spoke to the waiter in Mandarin again before asking Hodge, what would you like? Hodge stared blankly at the menu, unable to make heads or tails of it. Why don't you order for me? Something with chicken, please. Artemis gave the waiter the order, handed him the menus, and he walked off. So, what's in the bag? Hodge asked. In due time, my friend. In due time, Artemis said with a wink. So you have any ideas on how to play the concert? It's going to be difficult to interrogate him in the middle of a show, so we are going to need to get him isolated. Is there a back room we could use? Not really. Robert has a couple of people who work in the back room, running drinks up, and it's the only pathway to the back smoking patio, Artemis replied. Guess it's going to have to be the bathroom then, Hodge said with a groan. If we can get him in there during the show, it should be empty, and one of us can stand guard while the other finds out where Rudo and Duke are. So we just have to get a guy into the bathroom. Doesn't sound like that difficult of a task, especially when compared to everything else we've done. Cheers to that, Hodge said as he raised his glass to Artemis. They toasted as the waiter showed up with dinner, setting down a full chicken covered in a mysterious red sauce in front of Hodge. He stared at it intently while Artemis dug into her meal. After a moment, he shrugged and dug in. Chapter 7. The walls of Tate's bar were shaking as the band worked their way through their first song, Justice Through Destruction. Artemis and Hodge approached the front door and paused to game plan. Robert texted me a few minutes ago and said our boy is there, Artemis said, peering in through the front window. It looks like a fairly packed house tonight, so we should be able to slip in without him seeing us. So any ideas on how to get him to the bathroom? Robert says he is hanging out near the back by the soundboard. Apparently, his girl doesn't want him distracting her during the show, so he can't be within her eyesight. She sounds like a real keeper, Hodge said. You'd be amazed what men will go through to be with a hot tattooed guitar player in a metal band. Artemis replied, as far as getting him back there without dragging him through the crowd and causing a commotion, I might have an idea. When we go in, head to the right and go wait in the bathroom. You got it, Hodge said as he started to go into the bar. As he opened the door, he paused. Hey, can I borrow your laser pen of doom? Might help with the interrogation. Artemis pulled the pen out of her pocket and tossed it to him. I want that back, just so you know. Hodge winked in acknowledgement and went inside. Artemis waited a beat before following, heading straight for the bar. Robert celebrated her arrival by sliding a glass of whiskey across. She took a few sips while turning to check out the band, who was doing a great job of getting the crowd riled up with moshing and stage diving. On a normal night, Robert would have put a stop to the diving, but there were more important things to attend to. Hey, Robert, I need 2 large beers. A 30-something blonde waitress yelled out from the edge of the bar. Her hair was pulled into a ponytail. Her shirt was stained from multiple spilled drinks, and the look in her eyes was that of a combat vet who had watched his friends blown apart by the enemy, which was a typical look of someone who had spent at least a decade in customer service. Coming right up. Artemis slid over a couple of seats and took up position right beside her. Hey, sweetie, you doing okay this evening? She asked. Darling, it's one of those nights. I can handle having my ass grabbed on a regular night, but this moshing bullshit is the worst when you are carrying a tray full of drinks, the waitress replied. Yikes, I'm sorry. I tell you what though, I think I know a way to make your evening a whole lot better. Honey, I'll be honest, you're hot as hell, but after nights like this, I just don't have the energy for what you have in mind, the waitress replied as she placed the 2 large beers on her tray. Artemis chuckled a bit before responding. That's not quite what I had in mind this evening. Actually, I needed a small favor from you. A favor I'm willing to tip very generously for. The waitress leaned up against the bar, ignoring her tray of drinks. Okay, I'm listening. You see that guy over there next to the soundboard? The one with the face scar? Artemis asked. Well, he hit on me pretty hard the other night, and it turns out his girlfriend is the guitar player in the band. That cheating bastard. I fucking hate men like that, the waitress said, perking up with anger. Yeah, they are indeed the worst. I was hoping you could help teach him a lesson, so I thought you could baptize him with those beers there. And don't worry, Robert and I are tight, so he'll be okay with it, Artemis said, pointing over to Robert, who responded with a thumbs up. Honey, my ex cheated on me, and let me tell you, I ain't gonna stand for it. I'll douse him with beer. Hell, I'll shank his ass if you want. Make it look like an accident, the waitress replied, getting riled up. Dial it back a bit, Artemis said as she put her hand on the waitress's shoulder to calm her. I think the beer shower will be good enough for now. Once you soak him, tell him there are some fresh towels in the bathroom. I have a friend waiting in there to teach him a lesson. Oh, is it a gay friend? Because I know a guy that'll pay good money if you can get that on tape. Artemis stared blankly at the waitress for a moment, trying to comprehend the request. After a moment, they both look over to Robert, who motions for the waitress to go. The waitress nodded in approval, picked up her tray, and embarked on the mission. Wow, Artemis exclaimed as Robert walked over. Yeah, I know. But she shows up on time, works hard, and liked to wear low-cut tops. Dude, you're old enough to be her great-great-great-grandfather. Hey, don't judge me, Robert said defensively. I own a dive bar and start drinking at 9 in the morning. Being a dirty old man is just the next logical stop on my chosen life path. Artemis shakes her head in disapproval before downing the remainder of her drink in a single gulp. The waitress weaved through the crowd towards her target. Rocco was nodding his head to the beat, oblivious to what was about to happen to him. The waitress walked by the last table between him and her and pretended to trip over the chair. Instead of simply dropping the tray on him, she launched it several feet in an exaggerated pratfall worthy of an entry-level community college improv comedy class. While she lacked style points, her aim was on target as the full contents of both beers landed squarely on Rocco. What the fuck, you stupid bitch, Rocco screeched, wiping the beer from his face. Oh my God. Sir, I'm so sorry, the waitress said apologetically. I tripped over the chair, and I'm just so sorry. Well, don't just stand there with your head up your ass. Go get me a towel or something. I'm so sorry, sir, but we're out of towels behind the bar. There should be plenty in the men's room, however. Rocco became visibly frustrated. God damn it. You are going to make me miss my girl's set. After she's done playing, I'm gonna get your clumsy ass fired. Oh, sir, I'm so sorry. Please don't, she pleaded. Just point me towards the bathroom and fuck off, Rocco said in a dismissive tone. It's down the hall over there, sir. Rocco walked off towards the men's room, still wiping the beer from his face. When he got out of range, the waitress turned towards Artemis and Robert to give them a big thumbs up. After they responded in kind, the waitress pointed in Rocco's direction before making an inappropriate crude humping motion, insinuating that he is about to have a rough time in the john. Artemis shook her head in disgusted amazement as Robert slid a refill her way. She downed it in a single gulp before following Rocco, as she needed to guard the bathroom so that the concert goers don't walk in on an interrogation. The men's room at Tate's bar was an extension of the rest of the bar, with the walls covered in band autographs. The only difference was a giant ice-filled trough and a single shoddy stall that housed a graffiti-laden toilet that was missing a seat. Rocco threw open the door in anger, nearly knocking down a patron as they exited, leaving the room empty. That fucking bitch. I'm gonna rip her a new one. Rocco fumed as he ripped a stack of paper towels out of the holder. He began to dry himself off, focused entirely on himself as Hodge slowly opened the stall door. Once he realizes he has the jump on him, Hodge forcefully stepped out, grabbed Rocco's head, and buried his face into the mirror, cracking it. He continued his assault by throwing Rocco back into the stall, with the toilet breaking his fall and possibly a rib or two. Before Rocco could regain his footing, Hodge was on top of him, with his knee pressed into his chest. Remember me? Hodge asked. Rocco recoiled in terror. What? What the fuck are you doing here? You're supposed to be chained up. Apparently, I'm a little more resourceful than you or your boss gave me credit for, Hodge said with a smile. And speaking of your boss, where is he exactly? I don't know what you're talking about. Hodge relaxed the pressure off Rocco's chest and stood above him in a menacing manner. Really? You want to play this game? Okay, he said, grabbing Rocco and flipping him over into the dreaded swirly position. Rocco's face was submerged in the dirty toilet water for a few seconds before being pulled up, giving him a gruesome taste of what Hodge had in store for him. As you may have noticed, this toilet has some issues. Namely, it doesn't want to flush, Hodge said as Rocco gagged and gasped for clean air. Judging by the look and smell, the patrons at tonight's show have been living on a steady diet of alcohol and greasy street vendor food. Not a great combination, if you ask me. You're sick, man. You're just fucking sick, Rocco screeched. Oh God, I'm gonna puke. You might want to hold that in, unless of course you'd like to revisit it in a few moments. Or you can tell me about your boss. Your choice. Okay, I'll talk. Rocco yelled out of fear. Hodge tossed him back down onto the toilet and listened. Okay, so his name is Rudo. He's tall, got blonde hair. He's also a badass motherfucker who does whatever he wants to do, and there isn't anything you can do to stop him. Hodge began to laugh and continued until Rocco joined him, albeit uncomfortably. You're a funny guy. You know that? You know, I've been known to tell a joke from time to time. You want to hear one? Oh, who am I kidding? Of course you do. Okay, you ready? Knock, knock. Rocco remained silent for a moment before gathering the courage to nervously answer who. Who's there? Hodge punched him on the bridge of his nose, sending a stream of blood rolling off the bottom of his face. Really, cop? That's all you got? Real original. Rocco taunted. Hodge pulled out Artemis's future pen of destruction. He held it up right in front of Rocco, who stopped acting out and became very focused. Look, I get it. You're a stupid motherfucker who is in way over their head. And given your history, I'm guessing this isn't your first beating. So you probably think you can outlast me like you outlasted them. But given the look in your eyes, I get the sense you know what this is. And you know I'm different. Rocco nodded furiously as he finally realized the level of trouble he is in. So, you know what happens when I do this? Hodge said as he stabbed Rocco in the arm with the pen. And this, and this. And this, and this, Hodge continued as he stabbed Rocco in his leg, chest, head. He held the pen directly in front of Rocco, with his thumb hovering over the detonation button. Rocco screams in terror as Hodge injected half a dozen devices into him. No. 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 He pleaded through the tears. Please, I'll tell you everything you want to know. Hodge relaxed his stance. Okay, I'm listening. You have to promise me you're going to let me go. You have my word. Once you tell me what I want to know, I'm going to walk out that door and you'll never see me again. Hodge promised. Okay, Rocco said as he attempted to compose himself. Rudo and Duke have a small building just outside of town. It's way off the beaten path and only a handful of people know about it, so it's not heavily guarded. Then how do you know about it? Hodge inquired. They needed my help unloading the gear. Rudo paid me, gave me a lottery number for next week, and I was out the door. Okay, so where is it exactly? You know the burned out gas station on Route 9 headed east out of town? The one that went up in that arson a few weeks back. Yeah, I know it. Okay, go about 3 miles past that. There's a dirt road on the right that will take you down into the woods. After about a mile, there's a clearing with some buildings. That's where they are, I swear. Rocco said, continuing to recoil every time Hodge moved the pen towards him. Now you ain't lying to me, are you, Rocco? No. I swear, I'm telling you the truth. That's where they are. But I don't know how long they're going to be there. They were talking about moving east when I left there this morning. Rocco screamed. He continued to plead as Hodge held up the pen again. Oh, come on, man. I told you everything I know. You gotta keep your word. What's a man without his word, right? Yeah, you're right. I'm a man of my word, Hodge said as he ended his threatening mannerisms. Now, I'm going to walk out that door and you're never going to see me again. Provided that you hang tight in here for a few minutes since I gotta pay my bar tab. Can you stay in here like a good little boy? Rocco nodded furiously in the affirmative. I didn't quite catch that, Hodge said, holding the pen up again. Yes, I won't move. Good boy, Hodge said as he pocketed the pen and walked out of the stall. Rocco was shaking from the ordeal he just survived. Artemis was standing guard outside the men's room when Hodge finally exited. There you are. You find out where we need to go. Yep, there is a compound just outside of town. Should be lightly guarded too, according to him. Hell yeah, Artemis said, slapping him on his back. I'm impressed, Hodge. How did you get it out of him? Dunk his head in the toilet? Well, I started with that, but he didn't open up until I pulled this out, Hodge said as he revealed the pen. I didn't detonate it yet, though. Here, allow me. Artemis said as she grabbed the pen and clicked the top button. Oh, wait. How many times did you stab him before he talked? I don't know. 6, maybe 7 times. We have to go, Artemis said, grabbing Hodge's arm and dragging him away from the bathroom. Wait, what's wrong? We have to go now, and you owe Robert an apology. He likes Johnny Walker Black. Find the biggest bottle you can, and get 2. Oops. Rocco began to feel discomfort in his limbs, which spread to his chest. Oh God, no! He sheepishly pleaded, as the devices within him began to activate. He watched in horror as his flesh turned bright red, started to boil and melt off, spreading from each of the injection points. His screams would have alerted everyone to his plight if it wasn't for Valkyrie's revenge going into their final song. Face full of lead, the pain spread through his body until they reached each other, mixing and turning from red to blue. For a brief moment, his flesh stopped melting as the blue color raced through his veins. When the blue reached the initial injection points, they began to emit a loud tone, as if to warn anyone nearby that they should seek cover. The tone became louder and louder, to the point where Rocco's ears began to bleed. He let out one last scream before the injections detonated, covering the graffiti walls in a fresh coat of red. Chapter 8. Artemis and Hodge parked their car a quarter-mile from the clearing, not wanting to alert Rudo to their presence. Artemis grabbed the bag from the Chinese restaurant out of the back seat, threw it over her shoulder, and began walking into the woods towards the clearing. You know Rudo. Any idea what we might be in for? Hodge asked, hoping that Artemis had some insights into what they were walking into. If we are lucky, there won't be many guards. For all his strengths, Rudo is a lot cockier than someone in this line of work should be. He probably views me as his only real threat, and since he believes I'm out of the picture, in his mind, he's already won. Here's hoping you are right, Hodge said as they reached the edge of the tree line. They kneeled down in order to survey the situation. The compound was a dilapidated warehouse that looked like it hadn't been used since the 60s, with peeling paint and busted-out windows highlighting the neglect. A pickup truck with a gas-powered generator in the back was parked beside the fuse box, producing just enough juice to illuminate the facility. Hodge peered through his mini binoculars and saw 3 figures moving boxes back and forth from the building. I see a few men down there, but it's too dark to tell if it's Rudo or Duke, Hodge said, putting up his spectacles. You got anything in your bag of tricks there to help out? I don't believe so, Artemis said as she dug through the bag. It doesn't really matter though, as we are going to raid the place regardless if they are outside or not. Okay, so what's the plan? Hodge inquired. More than likely, Rudo isn't going to be doing the heavy lifting, so there's a good chance he's in the building. I'm going to sneak around and go in through the south entrance to track him down and hope that there aren't more guys inside. So, what do I do? Well, Artemis said with a pause, you see those 3 men down there? Hodge groaned before responding. Well, do you at least have something in your bag that might help me survive taking on 3 henchmen at once? I mean, I'm glad you have the utmost faith in my ability and all, but let's be realistic here. Artemis chuckled as she reached into the bag. She fumbled about for a few moments before pulling out a handheld water pistol. Hodge was unimpressed at the sight of the tiny blue plastic water gun. Are you serious? If I was in an actual water gun fight, it would be like bringing a derringer to a bazooka battle. Come on, Hodge. I picked you because you were bright. Did you learn nothing from my computer? Artemis asked as she pulled the trigger of the water gun down about halfway. A bright blue light began emitting from the end, with particles of white being drawn to it. Each particle that made contact with the source caused the blue light to grow larger and brighter. After a few seconds of this, Artemis released the trigger, and everything went dark again. Hidden in plain sight, remember? Holy hell, that was amazing, Hodge said as he took the weapon from Artemis and inspected it closely. Is it powerful? It makes my laser pen look like a regular off-the-shelf pen. You need to be careful though, because not only does that thing pack a punch, it has a 60-second cooldown. So my advice is to take out a target, then run like hell until it recharges. Great. More running. I swear I'm going to have to join a gym if I'm going to keep partnering with you. Well, if you need some extreme performance-enhancing drugs, just let me know. My dealer is a lot better than anyone currently alive, Artemis said with a wink. Hodge was unsure if she was kidding or not. So, where is your gun? Hodge inquired. I'm more, shall you say. Hands on. Artemis replied as she pulled out a couple of padded sparring gloves and began to equip them. Let me guess, they shoot missiles or teleports those you punch into a netherworld dimension? Nah. It's just light as a feather. Hits with the power of reinforced steel. And Artemis smacked the sides of her hands together, triggering a green laser bar to form over the knuckles. She demonstrated their power by punching a tree limb, slicing it clean off. Something with a little more power should my adversary have a weapon. Hodge smiled, then looked at his water gun. The smile dropped from his face as he realized he got the short end of the future weapon stick. Okay, you ready to do this? Once more into the breach. As they began to walk towards their final battle, Hodge grabbed Artemis by the arm to pause things. Hey, Artemis, if this goes south, I just want you to know that. Hodge, I swear to Christ, if you try and make this a sentimental moment, I will stab you in the dick with my exploding pen and detonate it. Artemis quickly replied, cutting him off in mid-sentence. Oh, well, in that case, good luck, and first round is on me after we save the world, Hodge hastily replied. That's better. Now come on, world isn't going to save itself. Chapter 9. Hodge waited until the trio was walking back towards the building to make his dash from the edge of the trees to the truck they were loading up. Fortunately for him, it was a long walk for them to make, giving him the necessary window to make the dash across the open area. He crouched behind the truck to catch his breath and await their return, taking the time to psych himself up for the confrontation. A few moments passed, and he could hear them making their way back to the truck. Okay, guys, this just a couple more trips and you'll get your payment, Duke said as they approached the truck. You just have to figure out if you want sports scores or lotto numbers. Afraid that ill-gotten payday is going to have to wait, Hodge exclaimed as he popped out from behind the truck. Miss me, Duke? Special Agent Hodge. It's good to see you again. I must admit, I am rather surprised to see you this soon, Duke replied in a confident manner. I guess that's the benefit of being me. Everyone always underestimates me, so I get to surprise people in a regular basis. So, here I am, the object of your obsession. You know, when he recruited me, Rudo showed me articles on you. How you devoted so much of your life to hunting me down, always being one step behind. Must have driven you crazy to know I was out there murdering people, and there wasn't anything you could do to stop me. Don't flatter yourself, Duke. You were nothing special. Just another name that came across my desk. Another low-life scumbag that needed to be removed from the gene pool, Hodge replied. I would say whatever helps you sleep at night. But I'm just going to have my henchmen kill you, so it's a non-issue. Duke motioned for the two henchmen to attack. They were mirrors of each other, standing over 6 feet tall and ripped. If either one of them reached Hodge, he would be in for a bad day. Hang on now. Can you guys just relax and listen for a moment? Hodge said, putting his hands up in the stop position. The henchmen complied, much to Hodge's amazement. I don't know who you are, nor do I care. I'm here for Duke, and only Duke. You guys can take off, hitch a ride back to town, and live your life. So, what do you say, boys? If y'all kill him, I'll give you lottery numbers and a month's worth of sports scores so you can live it up in Vegas. Duke calmly replied. The two henchmen began to advance, but froze in place when Hodge pulled out his gun. Yeah, that's what I thought. The standoff lasted a few seconds until Duke and the henchmen realized it was a squirt gun, which triggered uncontrollable laughing from all three of them. Hodge began to chuckle as well, but kept his sights on the advancing threats. After a few moments, he pulled the trigger halfway down like Artemis had shown him, creating a bright blue and ever-growing light. He could feel the power coursing through the weapon, his hands trembling as they struggled to contain it. As soon as the lead henchman took notice, Hodge finished the trigger pull. An orb of blue light rocketed out from the tip of the weapon, landing a direct hit on the lead henchman. Everyone in the vicinity was forced to avert their eyes due to the extreme brightness. When their eyes readjusted to the darkness, they saw that the upper half of the lackey had been eviscerated. A geyser of blood spewed forth, coating the stunned evildoers in crimson. "Holy shit," Hodge said as he stared at the gun for a moment before pocketing it. He looked up to notice the other henchman wiping his face clean with his sleeve before beginning to advance. "Oh, I kind of hoped that would have scared you off. That was my brother motherfucker," the henchman said as he moved with purpose towards Hodge. "I'm going to end you." Hodge let out a deep sigh before taking off running. The henchman yelled out as he pursued him, making up the distance between them quickly. Hodge made it about 15 yards before he was caught by the back of his shirt and pulled backwards onto the ground. He landed with a thud and looked up to see his attacker slowly moving in for the kill. Hodge quickly started to crawl backwards to buy more time. "Hey, look, man, I'm really sorry about your brother there," Hodge pleaded. "Shh," the man replied, holding his finger up to his lips. "You can apologize and beg all you want, but it's not going to do one damn thing to change what's about to happen to you. So what? You going to shoot me in the head? Get it over with quickly so you can get to mourning your brother out in Vegas?" The bad guy stopped in his tracks and nodded his head. "You know, I like that idea. Gonna get me some hose, some top-shelf liquor, and celebrate the life of my brother in style. But it can wait until after I'm done torturing your ass like you at Gitmo." A tiny ding emitted from Hodge's pocket, alerting him to the gun being recharged. He carefully slid his hand in and got the weapon ready. "Sorry, but I'm not really into that kinky stuff. But that's not a judgment on you. By all means, live your life." "Man, fuck you," the henchman yelled as he ran towards Hodge. As he got into range, Hodge kicked him squarely in the knee, sending him tumbling down. Hodge caught him by his neck and held his head up away from him. "Open wide," Hodge said as he rammed the water gun into the attacker's mouth and pulled the trigger. He started to convulse as the particles built up inside, eventually leading to the detonation of his head. The force of the blast covered Hodge in brain matter and shattered the gun in the process. "Fuck," he said, pulling himself up off the ground and tossing the now useless weapon aside. "You look like you're ready for me," Duke yelled out as he stood about 20 yards from where Hodge was. Hodge dusted himself off and joined in the standoff. He stretched his arms out and motioned for Duke to come on. Duke smiled before running full steam towards him. Hodge remained paralyzed as this freight train of a human being barreled towards him. Just as Duke got into striking distance, Hodge fell straight to the ground, ducking the wrap-up attempt and tripping him up. Duke used his face to break the fall to the ground, snapping his nose in the process. Hodge used this opportunity to make a break for the truck, in the hopes there would be a weapon he could use. Even though Duke was face down in the dirt, he knew he was no match for him hand to hand, so he needed something to give him the upper hand. "Not bad, Special Agent. Not bad at all," Duke said with a laugh, as he pulled himself up from the ground. He wiped his face and noticed a tinge of red on his hand. "Wow, you even drew blood. I'm impressed." Hodge ignored him and began digging through the bed of the truck. He shoved away computer parts and hard drives, but nothing that would allow him to fight effectively. Duke began to march towards him, forcing Hodge to the only thing he could use to defend himself: a broom. "Bring it!" Hodge yelled as he held cleaning tool out in front of him. Duke stopped just short of him. "What are you going to do?" "Sweep me away." Hodge smiled before smacking the broom on the side of the truck, snapping the bristles away and turning it into a makeshift spear. Duke was unimpressed and took a step forward, forcing Hodge to respond with a thrust. The tip of the broom handle embedded right into Duke's left shoulder, causing him to pause his advance. He looked at the impact before turning towards Hodge and glaring. Without saying a word, he lifted his giant right hand and brought it down across the center of the broom, snapping it in two. Hodge took a step back and looked on helplessly at his weapon that was now half its original size. "That's not good," Hodge said to himself. No, it isn't," Duke replied as he pulled the broom remnant from his torso and tossed it aside. He cracked his neck to the side before leaping forward, leading with his fist aimed squarely at Hodge's head. Instinctively, Hodge reacted to the incoming punch by thrusting the remaining portion of his weapon upwards, catching Duke in the forearm. The impact wasn't enough to cause much damage, but it was enough of a shock to force his fist back. He tried to punch again, but met the same fate, a small prick to the forearm. Duke yelled in frustration before lunging forward in an attempt to get Hodge in a bear hug. Hodge countered this move by ducking to the left and jabbing him in the side, sliding across the ground and popping up behind him and beside the driver's side door. This only enraged him further. Duke spun around and made another attempt to apprehend him by once again leading the charge with his fist. Hodge deftly opened up the door so Duke's fist made direct contact with the window, creating a spiderweb of cracks through it. Before he had a chance to recover, Hodge jabbed the tip of the handle into Duke's neck, embedding in his jugular. "Got you, you son of a bitch," Hodge said as he watched Duke gasp for air. The blood spurted out from the wound, coating the inside of the door as he fell to his knee. He attempted to put pressure on the wound in a vain attempt to prolong his life. Duke propped himself up by leaning on the seat, looking up at Hodge as he smiled at his hard-fought victory. "Well, I hate to cut this short, but I need to go check on my friend and help her take down your boss," Hodge said as he took hold of the door with both hands. "Enjoy hell, you child-killing prick," he said as he slammed the door onto Duke, sending the broom handle through his neck. Duke let out one last gasp before slumping to the ground in a heap. Hodge took one last look at his nemesis before heading towards the compound. Chapter 10. Artemis pried open the door to the compound, revealing a long hallway filled with broken glass and discarded furniture. Before Rudo and his crew showed up, it appeared as though this building hadn't seen human life since the Nixon administration, and judging by the destruction, it wasn't a high-quality form of human life. She cautiously walked through the corridor, pausing in front of a set of double doors. She placed her ear close to them and could hear movement on the other side. Artemis took a deep breath before flinging open the door and bursting into the room. The main room was cavernous and sparsely occupied by objects. More discarded furniture lined the walls, and the only source of recent activity was a pile of goods in the center of the room that was flanked by Rudo and a tall, lanky gentleman who was sporting a long blonde ponytail. "Rudo!" Artemis yelled, gaining his attention. Rudo and the other man turned to see who was disturbing them. Rudo chuckled to himself when he realized who it was. "I swear, Artemis, once you get something in your head, not even God himself can stop you." "Hey boss, you want me to take this bitch out?" the lanky man asked. "It would be in your best interest to show her some respect," Rudo responded. "She is far more capable than you are." The man took offense to that statement, letting out a huff. "Let me show you what I can do, huh? And when I beat her down, you give me a couple more college football scores for next week." Rudo shook his head and looked Artemis in the eye as if to say, "Can you believe this guy?" Artemis nodded to Rudo, giving him the okay to set his henchman loose on her. "So, we got a deal or what?" "By all means. Show me what you can do," Rudo replied before leaning back on the pile of goods on the floor. The man got a huge grin on his face before moving towards Artemis in an aggressive manner. Artemis stood her ground and was completely relaxed as he got close enough to strike. His first punch was met head-on with a punch from Artemis. The force of the blow from the future weapon shattered his hand. He stumbled back while letting out a yelp, looking helplessly at his now useless hand. "You can run along now, little man," Artemis taunted. "I'm through with you." Undeterred, the man pulled a knife out and threatened her with it. Artemis, unimpressed, smacked it out of his hand before punching him in the chest. He landed with a thud on his back, dazing him. "You really should have listened to your boss over there," Artemis said, standing over him like a lion over its prey. "You could have lived to see another day." "No, please. Please don't kill me," the man pleaded. "Sorry. You had your chance. And I gotta save the world and can't risk you getting another thought in your head that you can take me out when I'm not looking. Artemis coldly replied. She slammed the side of her hands together, triggering the laser knuckles. If you come back in the next life as a lowlife, here's hoping you remember this lesson, she said before punching him directly in the throat. The fist cut through it like it was nothing, completely detaching his head from the rest of his body. Artemis stood up, powered off the laser, and kicked the head over to the side before turning her attention back to Rudo. Come on, Rudo. Is that the best you got? He wasn't much of a challenge. An entire Nazi platoon wasn't much of a challenge for you. So what chance did this asshole have? Rudo responded. I swear, Artemis, it's good to see you in action again. Even after what? 70, 80 years you are still at the top of your game. Well, to be fair, I haven't taken much time off since the war, which is precisely the reason why I left you alive, Artemis. You do amazing work, saving innocent lives while punishing the guilty. You're like an R-rated superhero that rights wrongs before they can even take place. I need people like you in my America. And that's exactly why I'm here, Rudo, to save innocent lives, she responded. Why don't you trust me, Artemis? Rudo asked with a sigh. You know more than anyone that making this country great is more important to me than anything. I even sacrificed my family to protect it. I killed them all to protect this secret, this power, and I'm not going to let them die in vain. I'm going to use this technology to its fullest potential and make this country the most powerful nation today, tomorrow, and for all time. Rudo, I'm sorry that your family is gone. I'm sorry that you had to do what you did, but perverting our mission isn't the way to honor them, Artemis said sympathetically. Our mission was to prevent America from being destroyed, and we succeeded far beyond our wildest dreams. When we were back at the bunker, waiting for the machine to power up again, we would sit and talk about what we thought we could accomplish. Do you remember that? Rudo nodded in agreement. I seem to remember our pie in the sky. Best case scenario was to sabotage Germany to the point where Russia could overrun them and the rest of Europe. It would have doomed tens of millions to authoritarian rule, but our nation would have been a little better off, and there wouldn't have been a nuclear war that decimated the planet. Little did we know, huh? Yep, we went from marginally better to a world superpower in the blink of an eye. But instead of being happy with that, you want to play God and destroy not just us, but the entire world. What are you talking about? Rudo forcefully inquired. Have you not looked into your own future? 6 years from now, you run a successful presidential campaign. Then, about 2 months in, you decide it's time to let the world in on your little secret. Rather than make the country untouchable, it unites the rest of the world against us. And try as you might, you aren't able to prevent a global nuclear war. Every country, not just America, gets wiped from existence. Artemis, Artemis, Artemis. You are just seeing the first draft of things to come. Don't you remember during the war? There were several times when total annihilation was predicted, and we prevented it from happening every single time. This is different, Rudo, and you know it. We played our cards close to our vest back in those days, so nobody knew what we were capable of. The moment you reveal to the world you can see into the future, it all comes crashing down. No leader, no nation is going to let you have that kind of power. We shall see, Artemis. No, we won't, Rudo. You are a dear friend, a brother in arms. I have risked life and limb to save you, and we have killed untold numbers of men together in pursuit of a better world. But as you always say, the mission comes first. Right now, you are the biggest threat to the country and the world. I'm sorry you see it that way, Artemis. I'm going to give my family a country they would have been proud to live in, even if it means ending you, Rudo said as he stood upright. He flipped open the lid to one of the boxes and pulled out a large metal baton, about 4 feet in length and the diameter of a baseball. Before we begin, I just want you to know this isn't personal. I just have to do right by my family. I understand, Rudo. The feeling is mutual. The two of them got into their fighting stances and paused for a beat. They were both saddened by the position they found themselves in, but knew if was necessary, if their vision of the greater good to come to fruition. They nodded at each other to confirm they were ready for battle. Rudo strode over and swung the bar like a slugger going for a home run. Artemis jumped back to avoid the blow before leaping forward to take advantage of his backswing momentum. She was able to land a punch on the back of his arm, forcing him to release the bar. As it clanged to the ground, he spun around and shoved her forward a few feet. Artemis turned back to a defensive stance and waited for Rudo to pick up the bar again. You always did prefer speed over power, didn't you, Artemis? Rudo asked as he readied himself for the next salvo. Well, in my view, it's better to take 3 guys out quickly rather than 1 guy out via overkill. That is a sound strategy when you aren't in one-on-one battles like this one. We'll see, old friend, she said before banging the side of her right hand on her head, triggering the laser knuckles on that hand only. Artemis made the first move, lunging towards Rudo, who responded with another swing of his pole. Artemis used her laser fist and made direct contact with the bludgeon about 8 inches from the top, severing it. Rudo spun completely around and came back with another swing, which met the same fate, another 8 or so inches shaved off. He took a quick hop back to inspect the damage done to his weapon, which was now not much longer than a baseball bat. Rudo raised the club above his head and struck downwards, which Artemis deftly avoided by sidestepping and thrusting down with her enhanced arm. She hit the bar at an angle, shearing the pipe in half, but also into a pointed shiv. Rudo pulled back and prepared another strike. He lunged forward with the tip of the weapon aimed right at head level. Artemis leaned back to avoid being hit and punched upwards with the laser knuckles, striking Rudo on the wrist. His hand continued forward and to the ground as he pulled back his nub in pain. The pain was just as intense as the shock of losing a limb. He stood there, staring at his missing appendage for a moment before getting back into a fighting stance. This only lasted a few seconds as the shock set in and he tumbled to a kneeling position. It's over, Rudo, Artemis said as she deactivated her fists. Artemis! Hodge yelled out as he entered the room. He quickly ran over to her side and let his guard down once he saw the situation was well in hand. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, she said, unlatching the gloves to remove them. Grab that guy's shirt and bandage Rudo up. What? Why? Hodge asked, frustrated that Rudo wasn't already dead. Because I'm not killing him yet. I'm going to give him a choice. Hodge shook his head in disbelief before he complied with the request. One of these days, you're going to have to tell me the full story of what you two did in Germany. Maybe then this will make sense. Rudo collapsed to the ground, the reality of his failed plans sinking in, and he began to well up. I've failed. I've failed. I let down my family. They died for nothing. It's okay, big guy, Hodge said in an attempt to calm him down so he could begin to dress the wound. Here, let me take care of this. Artemis sat beside Rudo and put her hand on his back. I know it's difficult, Rudo. It's never easy losing someone you care about. I'm not going to pretend to know what it's like to be the cause of that loss. And while I'm sympathetic to your pain, I also can't pretend you didn't do horrible things in order to avenge them. So I'm going to give you a choice. It's not going to be a pleasant one, but it's better than killing you outright. Rudo nodded in appreciation of Hodge, tending to his wound before responding. Okay, let's hear it. My fate is in your hands. There's a town about 50 miles from here. Incredibly small backwoods, but large enough to have a decent grocery store and a few other luxuries. I purchased some property there a while back and converted it into a safe house of sorts. It's nothing fancy, but it's a lot better than death or a prison cell. But don't let those comforts fool you. This will be your prison. You will be cut off from all future tech. Outside of the new hand I'm going to make for you and a carefully curated selection of movies and TV shows that I bring you. You will be injected with both a tracker and a detonator to make sure you don't leave the designated area I set for you. This may or may not be permanent, but it will be a safe bet to plan on being there for a long, long while. Rudo reluctantly lifted his nub into the air, holding it for a second before realizing his hand wasn't there. Sorry, I was attempting to give you a thumbs up. Okay, Hodge, let's get loaded up and get out of here. If memory serves, you owe me a drink. Chapter 11. Artemis and Hodge walk into the office and toss their gear to the ground. Artemis collapses in her computer chair, while Hodge perches on the edge of the table. Well, that was quite the little adventure there, Artemis, Hodge said with a smile. I don't even know how I'm going to explain why I'm not going to keep working on the Duke case to my boss. Just give me a few weeks so I can stage the compound. Gonna make it look like he went on a rampage and was taken out by his own men. I'll call it in anonymously, but make sure the tip sounds crazy enough that nobody except for you will go looking for it. You get the credit, clear your case, and are off to bigger and better things. Yeah, I think that would work just fine, Hodge replied. Thank you. Consider it my way of thanking you for helping me save the world. Well, I was kind of hoping for some lottery numbers, but I guess this will do. Now, Hodge, gotta save something for your birthday. Artemis replied with a wink. So, now what? What do you mean? Are we still going to work together? Are you going to use some sort of future ray and wipe my memory clean? Or worse? For starters, don't worry. I'm not going to go all Rudo on you. I think you understand what possessing future knowledge means, and I'm pretty sure you've seen me in action enough to know you'd never be able to take me in a fight, so you don't want to press your luck. Well, that's a relief. But to fully answer your question, yes, we can certainly work together. I've been working solo for so long. This was a nice reminder that it's good to have a partner every now and then. I gotta warn you though, I have a high motor and run through more cases than you can imagine, so you'll need to be on your toes to keep up. I'm game. Just not today, Hodge replied. I'm already going to have a tough enough time explaining to my wife where I've been the past few days. Don't worry, I'll be in touch. Phone call this time. No laser carvings into maniacs' chests, Hodge said with a smile. Anybody ever tell you that you take the fun out of everything, Hodge? I've heard that a few million times in my life. They both chuckle for a moment before Artemis gets up to show Hodge out. Okay, go home, get some rest. You get some rest too, Artemis, Hodge said as he shut the door behind him. Artemis walked back to her desk, picked up the eraser, and started clearing the president's board. She picked up a marker with her other hand and marked out Duke's name before pausing while looking at the people saved board. She thought for a minute before erasing the number and writing everyone. She smiled at that sight as her computer began to beep with an alert. Before responding to it, she added a plus sign below everyone. Looks like it's time to start a new counter. The end. Thank you for listening to Eliminator Time Force. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe for more horror and sci-fi stories.